for depth, for truth, for connection that mirrors your light, not your wounds. You stop seeking comfort in certainty. You learn to dance with the unknown, to rest in the unfolding. You understand now that life is not meant to be figured out. It's meant to be felt, lived, experienced. You don't rush to get somewhere. You savor where you are. You trust that each moment is a stepping stone, that even the detours are divine, that your soul is being shaped in ways the mind cannot comprehend. And so you let go of needing to understand. You choose faith over control, grace over grasping. And in that grace, you begin to see beauty everywhere. In the way your heart beats even when it's tired, in the way the sun rises without being asked, in the way your breath continues to return no matter how many times you've broken. You stop waiting for life to impress you. You start noticing how it already does. The way strangers smile, the way music moves you, the way your own laughter surprises you after days of quiet. These are miracles too. Tiny whispers of life saying, keep going. You're not alone. You carry yourself differently now, not with arrogance, but with awareness. You know what it costs to become this version of you. The tears, the late night questions, the letting go, the growing pains. You wear your resilience like a soft cloak, not armor, because you don't need to fight anymore. You're not surviving, you're living. And living means allowing joy, allowing rest, allowing yourself to be seen not in your strength alone, but in your softness, your openness, your truth. This is what it means to come home to yourself, to return to the place within that never left, to remember that you are not your story, your trauma, your accomplishments. You are the one who holds it all with tenderness, with grace, with courage. You are not the roles you play. You are not the masks you've worn. You are the space behind the eyes, the stillness beneath the thoughts, the awareness that watches, that witnesses, that loves through it all. And now you live from that space. You make decisions from that place. You speak from that knowing. And life responds, not always with ease, but with alignment, with signs, with synchronicities, with doors opening in places you never thought to knock. Because when you show up as your truest self, the universe recognizes you. Life moves differently around someone who has remembered who they are, someone who no longer begs, who no longer performs, who simply is. You are not healing to be perfect. You are healing to be free, to be present, to be alive. And in this aliveness, you find what you were searching for all along, not in others, but in yourself. Not in the destination, but in the return to your breath, your truth, your heart. This is the sacred work. This is the quiet revolution. This is your awakening. Some days you wake up and nothing has changed externally, yet something inside you feels different, quieter, heavier, more raw. You can't explain it with words, not in any way that others might understand, but something in your body feels it, a knowing, a shift, like your soul is trying to speak after a long silence. And you listen, you stop rushing to feel better, you stop distracting yourself with tasks and timelines. You just sit with it, because now you've come to understand that not all pain requires fixing. Some of it just needs to be witnessed. You don't try to talk yourself out of your sadness anymore. You don't argue with your anxiety. You let them exist like weather, temporary but powerful. You let them teach you what still needs attention, what still hasn't been held with love. You sit with your own shadows, not as enemies, but as parts of yourself that were exiled long ago. And you invite them back. You say, you don't have to scream anymore. I'm listening now. And slowly something inside you softens. Because when you stop running from your pain, it no longer chases you. It begins to heal. It begins to integrate. You realize that healing is not always about changing everything. It's about learning how to sit with yourself exactly as you are. In the moments when your mind is loud, when your heart aches, when your breath feels shallow, you don't escape. You stay. You hold yourself like someone worthy of love, even in the midst of your storm. And that is the most radical act of self-love. Being with yourself when you're at your lowest, not just when you're shining. You begin to notice how often you've abandoned yourself, not out of malice, but but out of habit. You said yes to things that drained you. You quieted your voice to keep others comfortable. You bent so much for others that you lost your shape, and now you're learning to come back, to rebuild the bridge between your heart and your choices, to stop looking for yourself in places that never truly saw you. You return, not with shame, but with tenderness. Because the journey back to yourself is not a straight line. It's a spiral. And as you return, you begin to let go of the need to be understood. You realize that some people only knew the version of you that made them feel safe, the one who played small, who stayed quiet, who didn't rock the boat. They never met the real you, the wild, tender, radiant soul beneath the armor. And they might never understand who you're becoming. And that's okay, because you're no longer living for their understanding. You're living for your truth, for your joy, for your peace. You stop explaining yourself to people who only listen to respond. You save your energy for those who ask, not just out of politeness, but out of genuine care. You realize that your truth doesn't need to be digested by everyone. Some things are too sacred for mass consumption. Some healing doesn't need an audience. You're no longer performing your pain. You're no longer proving your growth. You're living it, quietly, powerfully, unapologetically. You find yourself craving simplicity, not out of lack, but out of clarity. You stop wanting more just for the sake of having it. You stop chasing things that look good but feel empty. You want depth. You want meaning. You want mornings that begin slowly, with breath and intention. You want relationships that are rooted in honesty, not convenience. You want conversations that nourish, not exhaust. You want a life that feels aligned, even if it's not glamorous. You want truth, even if it's quiet. And in the pursuit of that truth, you let go of the need to be strong all the time. You allow yourself to be soft. You cry when you need to. You rest when you're tired. You ask for help not as a sign of weakness, but as an act of trust. You lean on others without feeling like a burden. You stop carrying everything alone. And you discover that vulnerability is not the opposite of strength. It is the doorway to real connection, to healing, to love. You stop measuring your days by how much you got done. You measure them by how much you lived. Did you pause to feel the sunlight on your skin? Did you tell someone you love them without rushing? Did you laugh from your belly? Did you forgive yourself for not being perfect? These are the moments that make a life, not the checklists, not the accolades, but the small, sacred acts of presence. You start choosing yourself in ways that are quiet but profound. You say no without guilt. You walk away without drama. You prioritize your mental health over your productivity. You let people have their opinions of you and choose not to argue. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop explaining your boundaries. You simply honor them, because now you know that your peace is priceless, that your energy is sacred, that your life is yours to protect. You revisit old wounds, not to reopen them, but to finally hold them with care. You stop telling your inner child to toughen up. You ask her what she needs, and you listen. You stop judging the younger version of you who made mistakes. You thank her. She didn't know better, but she did her best. You hold her close. You tell her, you're safe now. You don't have to prove anything anymore. And in that act of remembrance, something begins to heal, not by force, but by love. You stop fearing endings. You understand now that not everything is meant to last, that some things are beautiful and temporary, that some people come to teach you, not to stay. You release them without bitterness. You bless them for the role they played. You honor the chapter they belong to, but you don't try to drag them into the next one. You let them go, because your story is still unfolding, and not everyone is meant to walk the entire journey with you. And as you walk forward, you do so with intention. You take your time. You don't need to have it all figured out. You trust the path, even when it's unclear. You follow your intuition, even when it doesn't make sense. You choose joy, not because life is easy, but because your spirit deserves light. You speak your truth, not to convince, but to liberate. You live your life, not for validation, but for meaning. You find home within yourself, not in a place, not in a person, but in the way you speak to yourself when no one is around, in the way you choose softness in a hard world, in the way you forgive release, and keep loving. You no longer search for belonging. You belong here, in your body, in your breath, in your becoming. This is not the end of your journey. This is a beginning, a quiet, sacred return to everything you forgot but are now remembering. A return to yourself, to your truth, to your soul. And in that return, you discover what you were searching for all along: peace, presence, and a love that never leaves, because it lives within you. At a certain point in your journey, you stop needing dramatic turning points to recognize transformation. You begin to see it in the subtle shifts, in the way your body relaxes when you're not performing, in the way your voice speaks more from truth than from fear. You feel it in your relationships, the ones you no longer chase, the ones you no longer force, the ones you no longer fear losing. You've finally begun to understand that love, the kind that nourishes, does not ask you to abandon yourself. It doesn't require you to audition for presence or compete for care. Real love, true love, meets you where you are, as you are. And now you choose that over anything that demands you shrink. You stop rushing to fix the discomfort. Instead, you begin to sit with it. You sit with the loneliness, not as a void, but as a space where your soul starts speaking louder than the world. A space where you meet your own reflection, not in mirrors, but in quiet, in solitude, in the echoes of who you've always been beneath the noise. And as uncomfortable as it may be at first, this space becomes sacred. You no longer rush to fill it. You breathe into it. You begin to build your home inside it. You begin to trust silence, not because you become numb, but because you become attuned. You no longer fear the quiet spaces in conversation. You no longer rush to fill them with noise. You let them stretch, expand, make room for meaning. You listen more than you speak, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've started to value presence over performance. And you realize now that listening is not just about ears, it's about energy. You hear what people don't say. You feel what they withhold. And in that awareness, you choose your engagements with more care. You begin to treat your heart like a living, breathing being, one that has known abandonment and is learning safety, one that has been broken and still opens every morning. You don't rush its healing. You don't demand it trust again before it's ready. You give it time, space, gentleness. You cradle it the way you wish others had. You stop saying, "I should be over this by now," and start asking, "What do I still need to feel?" You meet your wounds not with shame, but with compassion. And that changes everything. You change the way you define strength. You no longer see it in how much you can carry, how long you can endure, or how stoically you can survive. You start to see strength in the soft things, in asking for help, in crying freely and choosing rest over hustle, in letting yourself feel joy even when everything isn't perfect. You stop idolizing struggle. You stop confusing burnout with achievement. You learn that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to put something down and walk away. Not because you failed, but because you chose yourself. You learn to listen to your intuition like it's a sacred voice, not a fleeting thought. You stop second-guessing every feeling, every gut response. You stop outsourcing your decisions to others who never lived your story. You realize now that the wisdom you seek has been inside you all along, waiting for your trust. So you get quiet, you tune in, you follow the tug that says, "This feels right," even when it defies logic. You begin to walk a path that feels designed just for you, because it is. It was carved by your soul long before your mind needed to make sense of it. You no longer glamorize chaos. You stop calling unpredictability passion. You see now how many times you mistook emotional instability for connection, mistook the high of inconsistency for love. You crave something different now: peace, predictability, presence, the kind of steady that allows your nervous system to rest. You stop choosing intensity and start choosing intimacy, the quiet kind, the slow kind, the kind that asks, "How was your day?" and listens to the answer, the kind that shows up, not in grand gestures, but in consistent presence. You notice how your energy responds before your mind can even process. You enter rooms and feel your body tighten, your chest pull, your breath shorten. And you don't ignore it anymore. You don't override your intuition with politeness. You walk away when your peace is disturbed. You no longer need a detailed explanation to honor your feelings. You don't require permission to leave what feels wrong. You trust your body. You trust your knowing. You trust yourself. You no longer feel the need to be everything to everyone. You stop trying to fix what isn't yours. You stop absorbing emotions that don't belong to you. You draw clear lines, not to isolate, but to protect, to preserve, to keep your energy from leaking into places that don't honor it. You learn the art of non-engagement, of walking away without fanfare, of saying, "I'm not available for this," and meaning it. You realize that peace isn't always found in confrontation. Sometimes it's found in silence, in exits, in choosing not to explain one more time. You begin to understand that not all connections are meant to last, that some people come to mirror back something you needed to see, then leave, and you don't cling anymore. You don't beg people to stay. You bless them for the part they played and let them go. You stop mourning endings that bring you closer to yourself. You trust the clearing. You make space. You wait, not passively, but patiently, for what's real, for what aligns, for what reflects the new version of you. And you become new in a way that is ancient. You return to your essence. You remember who you were before the world told you who to be. You strip away the layers of false identity, the good girl, the caretaker, the achiever, and find the one underneath, the one who is wild and wise, soft and sovereign, quiet and powerful. You stop trying to be someone and start becoming yourself. You realize that not everyone will celebrate your healing, that your growth might make others uncomfortable, that people who benefited from your self-abandonment won't applaud your boundaries. And you don't shrink because of it. You don't dim your light to keep them from squinting. You shine anyway, not to prove, but to be. You let your radiance disrupt. You let your truth unsettle, because you are no longer responsible for how others experience your authenticity. You understand that joy is not something you find. It's something you choose, something you create, something you allow. You don't wait for the right conditions. You don't postpone happiness until you're healed or successful or loved. You let yourself feel joy now, in the middle of the mess, in the in-between, in the ordinary. You stop waiting for life to give you permission. You give it to yourself. You stop performing for love. You start receiving it, without earning, without proving, without shape-shifting. You let people love you for who you are, not for who you pretend to be. You let yourself be seen, even in your brokenness, especially in your brokenness, because you know now that you are worthy of love that holds, not love that hurts, love that stays, not love that confuses, love that grows, not love that takes. You begin to meet life with a different kind of reverence. You wake up and speak gratitude out loud, not for the big wins, but for the small, sacred things. Your breath, your bed, your ability to begin again. You make peace with the imperfection of it all. You no longer need every day to be extraordinary. You just want it to be real. And so, you live, not as a performance, but as a prayer. There comes a time when your definition of happiness softens. It's no longer tied to big milestones, public applause, or the curated snapshots of success. It begins to root itself in the ordinary, how your morning coffee warms your hands, the sound of rain tapping against your window, the way your favorite song wraps around your heart like a memory. Happiness becomes less about arrival and more about presence. It's not a destination you chase anymore, but a feeling you allow in. You begin to realize that it was never lost. It was buried beneath expectations that were never yours to carry. You no longer crave a life that looks perfect. You crave a life that feels honest. You choose conversations that leave you grounded over ones that leave you drained. You're no longer interested in pleasing everyone. You're more interested in sleeping peacefully at night, knowing you showed up as yourself. You stop editing your truth to fit someone else's comfort. You understand now that honesty is not cruelty, it's clarity. And clarity, though uncomfortable at times, is what sets you free. You walk lighter without the weight of pretending. And with that honesty, you begin to revisit the places within you that still ache. Not to reopen the wound, but to clean it, to speak gently to the parts of yourself that were silenced. You hold your heartbreaks with reverence, not resentment. You stop demanding closure from people who never had the capacity to hold your heart with care. You give yourself the closure instead. You say, "This hurt and it mattered, but I no longer choose to carry it." And you lay it down, not to forget, but to forgive. Not for them, but for your own peace. You realize that letting go isn't always about losing. Sometimes it's about making space, for breath, for beauty, for becoming. You stop gripping what is trying to leave. You trust that what's meant to stay will never ask you to abandon your soul to be kept. You stop trying to fix what was always broken. You stop trying to salvage relationships that only survive in your imagination. You accept people as they are, not as you hoped they would be. And in that acceptance, you free yourself. You begin to rebuild slowly, intentionally, not from who you think you should be, but from who you truly are. You build with softness, with integrity, with soul. You no longer rush to reinvent yourself. You remember yourself instead. You reconnect with the parts you buried to survive, the playful one, the creative one, the one who dreamed wildly and loved openly. You bring them back. You welcome them home. And for the first time in a long time, you learn to say yes to what nourishes you. Yes to rest. Yes to play. Yes to setting your phone down and looking up at the sky. Yes to reading something that has no purpose other than to make you feel. Yes to movement that feels like freedom, not punishment. Yes to meals that feed your body and your joy. Yes to people who see you and stay, not because they need you, but because they cherish you. You start saying yes to life, not the life you were told to want, but the one your soul longs for. And you start saying no too. No to rushing, no to urgency that disconnects you from yourself. No to conversations that feel like performance. No to energies that drain more than they give. No to places where your silence is more valued than your voice. You stop apologizing for needing space, for needing time, for needing more. You stop shrinking to accommodate comfort zones that were never meant to contain you. Your no becomes a full sentence, a declaration, a boundary with roots. You stop being surprised by your own strength. You stop looking at your survival like a fluke. You understand now that your resilience isn't accidental. It's sacred. It's part of your design. But you also stop glorifying it. You no longer celebrate the times you endured more than you should have. You honor them, yes, but you also ask yourself, what does thriving look like? You no longer wear your suffering like a badge. You no longer seek praise for caring too much. Instead, you put things down. You rest. You allow ease, because your worth is not tied to your struggle. You find yourself drawn to slowness, to ritual, to the kind of days that begin with breath instead of alarm. You make space for quiet moments, not because you're doing nothing, but because you're doing something sacred. You're tuning in. You're coming back. You're practicing presence. You understand now that stillness is not laziness. It's power. It's wisdom. It's clarity. And in that clarity, you move through life with more grace. You make decisions that reflect your values, not your fears. You no longer chase the high of being needed. You recognize now that being needed is not the same as being valued. You stop defining your importance by how much you give. You give freely, yes, but from overflow, not depletion. You hold space for others, but not at the cost of your own breath. You stop bleeding for people who would never offer you a bandage. You stop being available to everyone all the time. You start asking yourself, what do I need? And you answer with care. You notice how your body begins to trust you again, how it no longer tenses when you set boundaries, how your breath deepens when you honor your truth, how your shoulders drop when you stop pretending. Your body remembers. It remembers every time you betrayed yourself, every time you said yes when you meant no, every time you stayed when your soul begged you to leave. But it also remembers when you chose differently, when you walked away, when you rested, when you stayed silent not out of fear, but out of intention. And now it begins to feel safe again, with you. You stop looking at healing as a timeline. You let it be what it is, a spiral, a dance, a returning. You no longer get frustrated when the old wounds resurface. You greet them like familiar guests. You ask what they came to show you. You don't force them out. You don't pretend they don't exist. You sit with them, you feel them, and then you let them pass. Because now you know that emotions are messengers, not enemies. They are signals, not flaws. You begin to understand that you are not too much, that your depth is not a burden, that your sensitivity is not a weakness. You stop apologizing for feeling deeply, for needing connection that is real, not just present. You stop editing yourself to be more palatable. You let your full self take up space. You let your voice tremble. You let your tears fall. You let your joy be loud. You exist in your fullness, and you trust that the people who matter will meet you there. You redefine what success means. It's no longer about status, it's about peace. It's about alignment. It's about waking up and feeling good in your skin. About being proud of how you speak, how you love, how you live. You stop chasing goals that don't resonate. You stop hustling for approval. You build a life that feels like home. Not a house, not a career, not a relationship, but a state of being. You create home inside yourself, and you carry it wherever you go. This is your unfolding, quiet, beautiful, unapologetic. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You are right on time, right on track, right where you need to be. And when you forget, you come back to your breath, to your body, to your truth, again and again. Because that is the journey, not arrival, but return. Sometimes it's not about doing more. It's about undoing what never belonged to you in the first place. The expectations that were never yours, the rules you never agreed to, the roles you took on just to feel safe. You begin to question it all, gently but firmly. You ask, who told me I had to live this way? Whose voice have I mistaken for my own? And with each answer, something loosens. Something ancient begins to fall away. You don't rip it off, you release it, layer by layer, thought by thought, and in its place you begin to recognize yourself again. Not the polished version, but the one who existed before performance became a survival tactic. You start to notice how deeply you've been shaped by scarcity, not just financially, but emotionally. You remember how love was rationed, how attention had to be earned, how rest came only after exhaustion. You were taught that nothing came freely, not even peace. And so you lived like a warrior, always braced, always proving, always expecting that at any moment, something could be taken from you. But now slowly, you're learning a different way. You're unlearning the belief that love has to be earned, that joy must be justified, that rest must be rewarded. You are beginning to believe that softness can exist without danger, that peace is not the calm before the storm, it can be the storm that ends the war within you. You stop rushing toward goals that don't light you up. You let go of the illusion that productivity equals worth. You no longer crave being busy for the sake of distraction. You want presence, you want intention, you want a life that reflects your values, not society's checklists. And so you begin to do less, not out of laziness, but out of wisdom. You trust that slowing down is not falling behind. You know now that alignment can only happen when you give yourself space to hear your own rhythm. And it's never loud, it's soft, it's steady, it whispers instead of shouts. But when you listen, everything becomes clearer. You stop engaging in arguments that cost your peace. You don't need to prove your point anymore. You know what you believe, you know who you are, and anyone who demands you prove it is probably not looking to understand. They're looking to win. You're not interested in winning anymore. You're interested in connection, in truth, in energy that feels like a gentle yes, not a constant debate. You walk away not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know when a conversation is no longer about growth. You begin to recognize that safety is not found in certainty. It's found in self-trust, the ability to meet yourself fully in any situation, the knowing that no matter what happens, you won't abandon yourself again. You won't silence your needs. You won't betray your own intuition to make someone else more comfortable. You've done that before. You know the cost. And now you choose differently. You choose you again and again. Not from ego, but from reverence. From the quiet awareness that everything you've ever needed has been inside you all along. You stop fearing solitude. You stop calling it loneliness when it's actually spaciousness. You learn to distinguish between being alone and being disconnected. You learn that solitude is where the truth rises, where your real desires become audible, where your inner voice can finally speak without competition. You begin to make friends with your own company. You light candles even when no one's coming over. You cook meals just for yourself and plate them beautifully. You take long walks with no destination. You don't do these things to impress anyone. You do them because you're finally learning how to care for yourself the way you always wish someone else would. You revisit your pain with new eyes. You stop seeing your wounds as failures and begin to see them as portals, as invitations, as sacred openings through which your truest self emerged. You don't minimize what happened. You don't sugarcoat the impact, but you also don't stay there. You don't wear your trauma as identity. You wear your healing as a quiet strength. You carry the wisdom without carrying the weight. You tell your story not to be pitied, but to be understood. And only when you choose to, because now you know that your story is sacred, and sacred things are not shared lightly. You let yourself receive without guilt, compliments, kindness, help. You no longer flinch when someone offers love without condition. You stop pushing it away or shrinking in response. You say thank you. You let it land. You allow your heart to be held even if it's still tender. You understand now that receiving is not weakness, it is trust. Trust that you are worthy, trust that you are safe, trust that it's okay to be supported. You begin to find joy in the mundane. You stop waiting for the big moments to feel alive. You find magic in your morning rituals, in the way sunlight spills across your floor, in the rhythm of your favorite song. You let yourself dance in the kitchen, even if no one is watching, especially then. You laugh loudly, you cry openly, you let every emotion have its season, and you stop labeling them as good or bad. You just let them be. You let yourself be. You no longer need your pain to be validated to feel real. You no longer seek permission to grieve. You stop sharing your suffering just to be seen, because now you see yourself. You validate your own experience. And when you share, it's not from desperation, it's from authenticity. You know now that not everyone will understand, and that's okay. You no longer live for understanding. You live for alignment. You begin to hold space for contradiction. You allow yourself to be both grateful and grieving, hopeful and heartbroken, healing and still hurting. You don't try to clean it up or make it look tidy. You don't pretend that being spiritual means being serene all the time. You know now that real growth is messy, it's non-linear. It comes in waves, and you ride them with more grace now. You don't panic when you're pulled under. You know you'll rise again. You always do. You redefine what it means to be spiritual. It's not about escaping your humanity. It's about embracing it. It's not about constant positivity. It's about radical honesty. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. You pray with your hands in the soil, with your tears on your pillow, with your laughter echoing through your home. You make every breath a prayer, every act of love a sacred ritual. You live your truth not through performance, but through being. You stop living in the future. You stop saying, "I'll be happy when..." You stop postponing joy until the next milestone. You live now. You love now. You rest now. You stop waiting for life to look a certain way. You let it be what it is and find beauty in that. You trust that everything is unfolding exactly as it needs to, that you are not missing anything, that you are not behind. You are right here, right now, and that is enough. This is the quiet revolution, the soft becoming, the gentle return to yourself. You are not the person you once were, and that's something to celebrate, not to fear. You are becoming lighter, truer, freer, not because you're finished healing, but because you finally stopped running. You turned toward yourself. You stayed. And in that staying, you remembered what it feels like to be whole. There comes a season in your life when you no longer look at healing as a project with a deadline, but as a friendship you've committed to for life. It's no longer about getting rid of the wounds, but learning how to carry them with grace. You stop asking, "When will I be done?" and start asking, how can I be more gentle with myself today? And that shift, it changes everything. It's the difference between chasing perfection and building presence, between hustling for approval and resting in truth. You begin to see that healing isn't something that happens one day, but something that breathes with you every day. You wake up differently now. Your first thoughts are no longer shaped by panic or guilt or the urge to prove yourself. You begin your morning slowly, with intention, with breath. You put your hand on your heart and feel its steady rhythm. You whisper to yourself, I am safe, I am whole, I am here. And even if your mind resists it, your soul remembers. You rise not for performance, but for presence. You let yourself move through the morning without rushing. You don't reach for your phone first. You reach for yourself, your body, your breath, your truth. This is how you begin again, every single day. You notice that you're not as reactive anymore. You pause more, you speak less, you listen better. You no longer jump into emotional whirlpools just because someone else is drowning. You can feel their pain without losing your own center. You can hold space without abandoning your peace. You understand now that empathy doesn't require self-erasure. You've learned that love without boundaries isn't love, it's self-neglect. And so you love with strength, with softness, with wisdom. You give freely, but you don't give away your roots. Your love no longer comes with the price of your identity. You begin to celebrate yourself in ways that feel natural. Not loud, not performative, but honest. You light a candle after completing something that felt hard. You take yourself out for coffee and sit in gratitude. You don't wait for milestones to mark your growth. You celebrate the fact that you chose rest instead of burnout, that you spoke your truth even though your voice trembled, that you said no and didn't explain yourself, that you got through a day that felt heavy without falling apart. These are the victories that matter now. Quiet, sacred, deeply personal. You stop chasing the feeling of being seen. You've learned that visibility doesn't always equal understanding. You could be applauded by thousands and still feel invisible. So you stop seeking the spotlight. You seek the truth, the kind of truth that lives in small moments, not big platforms. You don't need to be known by everyone. You just need to be known by yourself, to recognize your own light, to witness your own becoming. And when you do, the need for external approval fades. You don't live to be liked, you live to be aligned. You let your friendships evolve or end. You stop holding on to people just because of history. You stop confusing duration with depth. You want friendships that are present, not just past, that hold you in your now, not just your nostalgia. You want conversations that inspire you, not drain you. Laughter that is real, support that is mutual, energy that feels clean. And when a connection no longer offers that, you don't force it. You bless it, you walk away. Not in anger, but in peace. You stop begging people to stay. You trust that what is meant for you will never require you to disappear to keep it. You start telling yourself the truth, not just the kind that sounds poetic, but the kind that shakes you a little. The kind that says, you're not happy here. You're not being honest in this relationship. You're playing small. And instead of running from that truth, you face it. You let it sting. You let it settle. And then you act, not from panic, but from clarity. You begin to rebuild from that place, not to impress others, but to respect yourself. You reconnect with your body, not as a thing to be fixed, but as a place to be felt. You move because it feels good, not because you're trying to earn a meal or a rest. You feed yourself with love, not restriction. You wear clothes that feel like a yes, not ones that make you feel like a project. You stop looking at your body through someone else's lens. You stop comparing it to versions that were never yours to begin with. You touch your skin with reverence. You hold your belly without shame. You dance in your mirror and smile. Not because you look perfect, but because you feel alive. You rediscover joy as something sacred, not as a reward, but as a birthright. You laugh more, freely, openly. You make room for play. You stop needing a reason to feel good. You stop waiting for circumstances to align. You let joy find you in the middle of an ordinary day. in a flower that bloomed outside your window, in a memory that makes you smile, in the way a song lifts your spirit. You stop resisting joy when it shows up. You don't say, "It won't last." You say, "Thank you for this moment," and you receive it. You begin to rewrite your inner dialogue. You stop calling yourself names. You stop replaying failures. You catch the thoughts that diminish you and ask, "Whose voice is that?" And more often than not, it isn't yours. It's inherited, learned, implanted. So you let it go. You replace it with something truer. I am allowed to take up space. I don't need to be perfect to be lovable. I am doing my best, and that's enough. You speak to yourself the way you would to someone you love, and slowly the tone in your mind begins to soften. You stop idolizing certainty. You make peace with not knowing. You don't need to map out every detail of your life anymore. You trust the unfolding. You follow curiosity, not just plans. You listen to the quiet nudges of your soul. You let yourself pivot. You let things evolve. You let go of rigid timelines. You realize that some of the best things in your life came unplanned. And that's where the magic still lives. In the unscripted, in the spontaneous, in the space between what you thought you wanted and what you actually need. You embrace your emotions without labeling them as good or bad. You stop apologizing for crying. You stop hiding your anger. You let yourself feel fully. You understand now that emotions are not problems, they're information. They're waves meant to move through you, not be suppressed. You don't shame yourself for being sensitive. You honor it. Your sensitivity is not a flaw, it's a superpower. It connects you to truth. It connects you to others. It keeps you awake in a world that numbs. You stop fearing your own voice. You start speaking with more courage. You stop shrinking in conversations to keep the peace. You stop hiding behind niceties that betray your truth. You speak clearly. You speak kindly. But you speak, even when it's uncomfortable, even when your voice shakes, because now you know that your truth matters, that your perspective is valid, that your presence is not optional, it's essential. You allow the past to be what it was. You stop rewriting it to make sense of it. You stop trying to justify what hurt you. You don't need to understand every detail to move on. You accept it, not because it was okay, but because it happened. You stop needing closure from people who chose silence. You close the chapter with your own hand. You say, "This is where I leave that version of me behind." And you do it with love, with grace, with power. There are certain seasons in life that arrive not with a warning, but with a quiet shift, a subtle unraveling of what once felt certain. And it doesn't feel like destruction at first, more like silence. Like sitting in a room that used to be full of laughter, only now the echoes have faded and you can hear your own breath for the first time. This is the beginning of a different kind of awakening. Not the kind you chase or strive for, but the kind that finds you, that strips away the noise, that settles into your bones when everything familiar begins to feel foreign. At first, you might resist it. You might try to fill the silence with distractions, new projects, new people, old habits. You might look for something to blame, anything that might make the discomfort make sense. But over time, you stop reaching outward. You realize that what's falling apart wasn't yours to hold forever. That the version of you who once clung to certainty is no longer the one who needs to rise. And so, you surrender. Not in defeat, but in reverence. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to show me?" You begin to notice the subtle grief that comes with letting go, not of people or places, but of identities, of expectations, of dreams that once felt like lifelines but now feel like cages. You grieve the version of yourself that tried so hard to be good, to be liked, to be perfect. The one who said yes when she meant no. The one who kept the peace at the expense of her own. You let her go, not because she was wrong, but because she was tired, because she carried too much, because she did her job. And now it's your turn to take over, with more softness, more truth, more you. As you sit in this space between who you were and who you are becoming, you start to see things clearly. You see the patterns you used to call personality, overthinking, people-pleasing, shrinking in your own presence, and realize they were never you. They were your armor, worn like a second skin, built over years of trying to be safe in a world that didn't know how to hold your softness. And now you're ready to take them off, to feel the air on your bare soul, to live without protection but not without power. Because true power comes from presence, from being seen as you are, without the costume. You don't need to be loud to be heard anymore. You don't need to be busy to feel valuable. You don't need to achieve to deserve rest. You understand now that your worth was never meant to be earned. It was always inherent, planted in you like a seed, waiting for the right conditions to bloom. And now the soil is fertile, the light is changing. You are no longer growing in the dark. You are choosing your own direction, your own pace, your own way of being. And even if it's slower than what the world calls success, it is richer, truer, yours. You stop measuring your progress in outcomes. You start measuring it in peace, in the way your body feels when you say no without guilt, in the way your voice doesn't shake when you speak your truth, in the way you no longer seek to be understood by those who never tried to know you. You stop explaining yourself. You start expressing yourself. And that expression, it doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes it's a journal entry, a deep breath, a moment of stillness in the middle of the storm. You don't live to be seen, you live to be real. And being real means facing the parts of you that are still scared, still wounded, still longing. You don't push them away. You don't tell them to get over it. You sit with them. You say, I see you. I love you. I'm here. You mother your own heart. You become the safe space you always wanted, the comfort you always searched for. And in doing so, you realize that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world convinced you to be someone else. You no longer chase relationships that require you to betray yourself. You don't bend to be loved. You don't compromise your truth for connection. You choose alignment over attachment, depth over familiarity. You understand now that love is not supposed to hurt all the time, that walking on eggshells is not the same as walking in love. You want to be chosen by someone who sees you fully, who meets you in your truth, not in your performance. And until then, you choose yourself, over and over, because the love you offer to others must first be rooted in how you treat your own soul. And when loneliness visits, as it does in every awakening, you don't fear it. You welcome it like an old friend. You sit with it. You ask it what it came to teach you, and it speaks not in words, but in feelings. It tells you that solitude is not punishment, it's preparation, that being alone doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means you're healing. It means you're no longer filling space with people who dilute your presence. It means you're making room.